All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Full Speed Ahead, Collaborative Career Pathways and Work-Based Learning in Iowa. Today's webinar is generously sponsored by our friends and partners at Burlington English. And right now I'd like to introduce Robert Breitbart with Burlington English, who's going to share a few words with us. Robert?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thanks so much, James. Really appreciate being here. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much. Hope this webinar is greeting you and you're safe and you're healthy. Thanks for everything you're doing to keep everything at the home front in good order and staying so concentrated on your learners, particularly on such a great topic as the one that Joe is going to share with us today. So we at Burlington English, we love taking English to the next level for our learners. So just know whether your learners are taking their first steps in English or ready for advanced and bridge programs, Burlington English has got you and your teachers covered. So all the concepts made easy, both for teachers to share with students and students to absorb. So the entire concept of what a career pathway plan is all laid out for both teacher direct instruction with the students, whether on-site or online, as well as seamlessly blending to everything a learner is going to be doing when they're logged off from their teacher and they're working on their own at home. So career exploration and soft skills is something that we can do. And by the way, during the pandemic or at any time, can't bring your learners to the career counselor? Why not bring a virtual career counselor to your learners? And with Burlington English's career exploration and soft skills modules, you can do exactly that. They can actually find out exactly what that process would be like. So when they eventually do meet with a career counselor, they are so far ahead. So again, whether it's a virtual career fair, a virtual job shadowing, Burlington English brings that to them. And once again, if you're thinking about IETs, IELCEs, any type of further study after particularly adult ESL, just know that Burlington English starts learners off the minute they start in your program, narrowing down, exploring careers, finding that career that is right for them so that when you offer them an IET and IELCE, they make a great decision. And what I love is through images that you see on the screen, they don't enter into those training programs cold. They enter in with the knowledge of the type of true real life dialogue, the kind of vocabulary that they're going to encounter in those training programs. So once again, they can enter into those programs with an amazing jumpstart. Well, everyone, we'd love to tell you more about it. Please visit our website at burlingtonenglish.com. Just find us at the contact tab right there on the website. And dozens of my colleagues would love to help you see how you can bring everything that I just showed you, not just to a few of your learners, but to all of your learners. So with that, I'll turn it back to James and Joe. Looking forward to a really fantastic webinar from you. Thanks so much, everybody.
Robert, thank you so much. We really appreciate your partnership and your friendship, everything you do for COABE in the field. It is much appreciated. So thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Joe Collins. He works as an education consultant for sector partnerships, career pathways, and work-based learning for the Iowa Department of Education. In this role, he helps to connect, assist, and empower groups of employers in Iowa to address their skilled workforce, economic, and community development issues through collaborative sector partnerships or sector boards. Prior to joining the department, he worked as a training facilitator for Iowa workforce development to develop and lead workshops through the community on topics such as resumes, interviewing, work ethic, and conflict resolution to a wide range of audiences. Before diving headfirst into the public sector, he also worked in HR, account and project management, and marketing in the private sector. He earned his Bachelor of Science degrees in marketing, Spanish, and international business from Iowa State University, and a Master of Science degree in adult continuing and occupational education from Kansas State University. Joe has also recently taken on the lead role for industry recognized apprenticeship programs in Iowa and is excited for the potential of this new and versatile type of work-based learning tool. So please welcome Joe by saying hello in the chat. You can let us know where you're calling in from. And as always, you can submit questions in the Q&A box. And with that, I will turn it over to Joe. Thank you.
Sounds good. And yeah, happy to be here. Appreciate everybody taking time out of their schedules to join for the conversation. I assume everybody can see the slides and hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're all Zoom pros at this point, but you never know. There's always a hiccup of some sort. So yeah, really happy to be here today from Iowa. We'll go through a number of different strategies that we've implemented here within the state regarding career pathways and work-based learning, many of which are not, obviously just going to work in Iowa. So hopefully, I see a number of states represented. These are hopefully strategies that you can pull down, and I'll share some lessons learned, and you can R&D them, rip off and duplicate as much as possible. That's a hope of trying to share some of this information, is that hopefully, within your community or your state, your respective region, whatever it happens to be, maybe glean some info and then be able to do something similar with that same or similar amount of success as we've had in our experiences. And like I said, I plan to share some of the lessons learned along the way. So I'll do a little bit of a background on what a career pathway is. It seems like that can mean a lot of different things depending on your audience and your employer and so forth. Talk a little bit about work-based learning as well. We'll go through some specific strategies and products that we've developed that, again, are available for public consumption. So hopefully you can grab them and then maybe, copy and paste some of that stuff out of there, whatever it happens to be, and then make your own, kind of regurgitate it for your own area or state or industry or whatever it happens to be. I'll give a little bit of background on those projects as well, in case you wanted to go through the process of recreating them, or again, kind of learning that background and what it takes over the last 4 years or so, what we've learned. And then finally, last but not least, some next steps and some recommendations that I'd offer to the group. I'm going to try to go through quite a bit of information relatively quickly here so we can leave some time for questions. You can always throw something in the Q&A box, or I see a lot of introductions happening in the chat box. I appreciate that. I'll try to kind of monitor those, or Jason or James is going to be watching it, and he might kind of let me know if there's a bunch in there and I haven't really addressed them. But I do intend to have a little bit of interactivity here using the chat box or the Q&A box. Very good. So if you haven't already, please do put a little bit of info about yourself over in the chat box, your name, who you work for, where you're located. If you want to give a little bit of info about, what your background is in career pathways and work-based learning, that's fine. But that's not, a requirement. We've got a pretty big group here. Oh, I see somebody used to work in Iowa and they left. You went to Alaska? Really, Heidi? Come on. Iowa to Alaska. That's okay. That's a great state too. But a little bit of my background. I guess you already kind of heard some of this in my bio, but I like to talk about this as it relates to how we're approaching some of these projects. We use a lot of our personal and professional experiences to really dictate and kind of help guide us in our professional lives, right? And what we're doing. So I went to Iowa State. 18-year-old Joe Collins wanted to be a veterinarian. In here in Iowa State University is one of the best schools in the country, really, for veterinary science. So it just fit really well that it was in my backyard. I liked animals. It just kind of fell into place. Unfortunately, that young Joe Collins did not do any job shadows or internships or really much of anything to help inform that decision. He just really liked animals and wanted to, play with puppies and kittens all day. Unfortunately, that first year of college, I realized I do not want to be a veterinarian. Reality quickly caught up to that dream or that picture I had placed in my mind about what a veterinarian does. And when I was being told to put my hand somewhere in a cow that you should not probably be putting your hand, that was a bit of a wake-up call that maybe I don't want to do this. And I know there's different types of veterinary science, of course, but it was just that, I was testing careers in college and unfortunately finding that my perceptions didn't match with that reality. So bounced around quite a bit within college, again, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I went into environmental science for like a semester, went to computer science for a semester, ultimately transferred over to the College of Business in MIS, so Management Information Systems, which is computer science for business, in case you've never heard that name before. Ended up staying in business, but changed majors a couple more times. Ultimately ended up in marketing, Spanish and international business. I studied abroad in Spain for a semester. It was amazing. I don't regret anything or that process, but I've got the student loans to pay for 5 years of college. a very expensive process of finding out what I don't want to do. Wish I would have done that before I was paying, 20 grand a year for it, sort of thing. So unfortunately, I took a route that maybe didn't financially make sense at the time. I graduated and worked in the private sector. That's not me. I've never been that skinny, and I never made that much money. But my primary motivator was money. I wanted to make a lot of money, and that was one of the reasons I got into business. I thought I was going to make millions of dollars and hang out with like Jay-Z and P. Diddy and get a yacht on the Mediterranean and whatever. But that, of course, again, didn't match reality, right? I made some decent money. I again was bouncing around though, trying to find what I wanted to do. And maybe that's stereotypical millennial, but I was just, still testing out things, churning through careers, generally I stayed with the same company for that time, but I dabbled a little bit in marketing, advertising, HR, a lot with account and project management. I really liked working with different types of people and different groups and really helping achieve those goals, like our customers and our clients, being the liaison for some of that work. But it wasn't something I was necessarily proud of. I wasn't passionate about it. So I went back to school at Kansas State University, kept it in the Big 12, what used to be the Big 12 at least, and got my master's degree in adult continuing and occupational education, with an emphasis on academic advising, because I loved education. I saw the value of education. And I, like I mentioned, I liked working with people to find out how to achieve their goals or their dreams. So academic advising seemed like a really good fit. I found a job with our local Iowa Workforce Development, our America's Job Centers, so one-stop centers. We call them Iowa Works here in Iowa. I got a job as a training facilitator for a TANF program we call Promise Jobs. So I was doing classes on resumes, interviewing, soft skills, conflict resolution. You kind of heard in the bio, but doing a lot of different things to try to help them understand how to find those jobs and then how to sell yourself to those employers. This job opened up at the Iowa Department of Education almost 4 years ago that even takes that a little bit further, of combining my passion for education directly with a lot of my private sector experience. And I do a lot of work with sector partnerships or sector boards, and particularly, as we're going to talk about today, the development of career pathways and industry guidance and work-based learning programs here within the state of Iowa. So taking kind of an indirect route, I don't know about everybody on the call here today, but it seems like this has become a pretty common way of doing it. So I said unconventional, but really what we found, this is very common anymore. Lots of young people particularly go to college not really having a clue what they want to do. They're just going to pick a major, maybe do some prereqs, whatever. But the average has become at least 4.5 year to 5 year program because they're kind of like what I was doing. I was a trendsetter, apparently. I don't know. But again, I've got the student loans to prove it. Testing things out, not really sure what's going to work, or sometimes even more common, they think they like it, they don't try it at all until they graduate, and then they try the career and then they hate it, and then they end up going back. And all of that financial burden, how that impact has on us and society as a general, so I view a lot of what we're doing now through that lens of that young Joe Collins, and how do we better prepare our students for those decisions, even if that is an adult, right? An adult student, or if we're getting them on the rebound, right? They're coming back to our community colleges, they're coming back to school. How do we have that realistic conversation with them? And more importantly, sometimes, how do we have materials available to them and resources that are informed, accurate, timely, so that they can make those more informed decisions? A quick shout out to our Future Ready Iowa initiative. This is tied to that Georgetown study that found that 68% of jobs by 2025 are going to need something above high school, right? I'm sure everybody is fairly well familiar at this point. It's been out for a while. I know a majority of your states have a similar program of how to kind of up the ante to get towards that goal. Here in Iowa, we, I guess, rounded up to 70. We wanted to beat that goal. I don't know. We're around 55% right now, so we have a ways to go. Unfortunately, COVID and the pandemic has really probably, sunk that a little bit. I think we can still get there. Lots of creative stuff is being done. But if you're curious about what's happening, particularly with this initiative, I would go to futurereadyiowa.gov just to learn a little bit more. And so I mentioned sector partnerships. We're not going to focus a lot on sector partnerships or sector boards, as they're sometimes referred to, but that is what I spend a majority of my time doing, is working with these groups around the state, which at the end of the day is really when a group of employers from the same industry or sector come together to collectively address their workforce issues. So these have been around for a long, long time. This, of course, is not a new concept in any way, but you're seeing a lot of traction, particularly with WIOA, of reinforcing the need of that business and industry engagement. So you've seen a lot of groups, a lot of states really start throwing a lot of resources at this. But here in Iowa, we've taken a little bit of a different approach, because a lot of our community colleges had already gotten ahead of that curve, and were facilitating their own sector partnerships already. So I was hired by the Iowa Department of Education to come in to really help from kind of the grassroots approach of supporting these initiatives that were already at play, whereas a lot of states have maybe done the top down of the government or the state entities are really running them. Here in Iowa, they're generally run by business and industry with support from the local community college within that region. So nothing against the other approaches, but we try to reinforce that it's meant to be business and industry led, but community supported. That's why you have this kind of diagram here. The gears I know are facing the wrong way, but that's the best I could do in PowerPoint. But business and industry running the show, identifying goals, and then tagging in their support partners along that way to help them get to those goals, which generally revolve around the 3 areas of talent or skilled workforce: talent attraction, talent development, and talent retention. How do I get more people? How do I attract those people? How do I develop those people? And how do I retain those people? And then there's a ton of benefits, of course, combining forces. You have more power together, more leverage and so forth, but you're saving money, you're saving time, you're saving sanity, is what I like to say to a lot of our employers as well, so that they're not getting a call from workforce development on Monday, somebody from community college on Tuesday, somebody from economic development on Wednesday, and guess what? A workforce development person calls them on Thursday that didn't talk to the first one. So how do we all get together at this same conversation, the same table, and all rowing in the same direction, so we're not duplicating services and kind of churning through the same problems over and over again? Now, all of the resources I'm going to reference today are at this redirect, the website at the bottom of the page, sectorpartnerships.educateiowa.gov. That will take you to the sector partnerships section of the Iowa Department of Education site. You'll see a map about where they're located in Iowa. You'll see some toolkits we've developed on how to plan for them, how to launch them, how to manage them. You'll see quite a few other resources, but definitely our career pathways and our work-based learning toolkits that we're going to go through here today. You will also see a series of webinars that we did last year with an amazing national consulting group called the Next Generation Sector Partnerships. Strongly recommend checking them out. They have a ton of really, really great free resources. They do their own series of webinars and peer sharing and peer learning resources, again, that are completely free of charge. So I'd go to, I think it's nextgensectorpartnerships.com. If you Google it, it will come up. But we recorded a series, 5-part, 90-minute series of having the consultants come and really have a conversation about their model they promote. And you'll see some back and forth Q&A with some Iowa sector partnerships during that process. But these are all on the website, as well as a YouTube channel we have for some of our other sector partnership stuff. So again, I could talk about sector partnerships all day because it's kind of my bread and butter, but I know a lot of you are doing those industry types of sector partnerships within your respective regions. Now, I'm curious, over in the chat box, how do we learn about career opportunities? So how are you finding your students are learning, or your counselors or your parents? How do we learn about careers kind of in the modern world? And I'll say maybe that aren't the best sometimes. So in the chat box, I'm kind of curious if some people want to start throwing some ideas over there. Where are people getting their career information? Word of mouth is a big one, sure. ONET Online. Where else are we getting them? Do we have any like head scratching moments where people are getting info from? Family, businesses, okay, schools, volunteering? Job search methods. You guys are being too nice, or you've got really good students. I don't know. There we go. Here we start getting some social media, TV, entertainment, right? Yeah. We find that in my experience working particularly with a younger audience at that earlier stage, but a lot of adults, by the way, we're getting our career information, whether we realize it or not, from entertainment. So we watch Grey's Anatomy and we think that's what doctors and nurses and surgeons do. Guess what? It's not, right? It's a soap opera. It's drama. It's entertainment. It's ramped up to try to entertain us. So again, whether we realize it or not, we're forming this impression, sometimes unconsciously, about what those positions do and what those professionals do in the real world. Often does not line up. right? So yeah, you've got Law and Order. You know, if you've ever been in the legal system, you know it is nowhere near as exciting as they do on Law and Order. Months and months of paperwork and research, and in between trials, you only get small snippets, right? I saw somebody said NCIS, so I appreciate that. But yeah, crime scene, this thing blew up, right, within the last decade. Lots of people wanting to do like crime scene investigation and all this high tech stuff. But then you have an honest conversation of, well, you're dealing with some pretty nasty stuff. Crime scenes are not really clean, and you're cleaning it up, and you're using all these fluids, and and people say, well, that's not what it is on the show, and it's like, well, that's what it is in reality. And then, by the way, all the paperwork, right? So you don't see somebody filling out paperwork. You can, live in the swamp and do that thing, right? That's whatever floats your boat. You can go fishing in Alaska, right off the coast of Alaska, and make a bunch of money. You might die, and that's exciting. There's SWAT shows and 911 shows and Dr. Pimple Popper, disgusting, but if that's your thing, go for it. 911, there's tons of cops and firemen and like even a lot of cooking shows. If you want to live in the mountains, you can do that. Go for it. If you want to moonshine, you can do that. Go for it. American Pickers, near and dear to my heart here in Iowa, actually right where I grew up. But lots and lots of shows about flipping stuff, right? Finding something that's cheap or broken and then I fix it. Properties, houses, cars, you see all these things where they always win, right? The reality show where they always win isn't actually reality, right? Again, things are staged, they're being paid, there's all these other things that you're not aware of. So unfortunately, when a lot of people get out into the real world and try this, it does not end as well, right? And then they get disenfranchised and they're angry and they come to us and they're really upset that they're not getting that job that they had seen on TV. And last but certainly not least, the Tiger King, right? I don't know if anybody had seen this show, and I bring this up, and I know I'm within kind of friends here, but I know there are people out there that watch this show and said, yes, sign me up. You might have even gotten calls from these people. How do I get involved in an animal sanctuary, and how do I buy tigers, and how do I do this? So again, kind of tongue in cheek, but I know from my experience in working with different populations and youth particularly, I saw this on TV and I want to do that. I don't really understand the implications and what it's going to take in the real world. Those expectations don't match reality, right? So what is a career pathway? Well, at the end of the day, it's really, as the name implies, right, a way of showing somebody a path into a career and what it's going to take. So how do I get started in that area? How do I work my way up, adding knowledge, skills, abilities, experience, whatever it happens to be, associated increases in wages and benefits and so forth. But how do I work my way through this career? Whether that's somebody has identified, I want to be a surgeon or a CNC operator or a race car driver, whatever it happens to be, and we've worked our way kind of backwards, or they say, I want to work in healthcare, and then we identify some of the things within that industry. What are the pathways within that industry? Here are 3 templates that appear in one of our toolkits on that sectorpartnerships.educateiowa.site. It's in the appendix, but a couple of ideas that we came across or that groups are using in Iowa. The pyramid approach is very common, where you show the foundational skills and I kind of work my way up, right, of specializing along the way. We've done kind of a bubble approach. You'll see kind of a combination of bubbles and the pyramids, kind of my way up through careers. But we know something that's very impactful for students and job seekers, when particularly one-on-one conversations, I see that somebody mentioned, is a roadmap, right? My roadmap of life. Here's where I'm going. Here's the direction I'm taking. What are the pit stops, the on-ramps, the off-ramps to get to that point? I may be even inserting some of the off-ramps for my personal ideas. I want to have children. I want to travel the world. I want to do this, but can be very, very impactful for learners because they're building that within their mind. They see it, they identify with it, they can visualize it, and then it can really cement that. And it means a lot more than just on paper, kind of writing job occupations and dates, right? So like I said, we've embraced kind of the bubble pyramid approach because these are statewide documents, as you're going to see, and kind of averages. But a lot of our groups, our sector partnerships, will grab them, pull them down, and customize them at the local level. So here's kind of a generalized time frame that we tend to follow for our career pathways projects. As you can see, it's a 6-month process. It is half a year. We tend to try to do around 2 per year. We're getting to the point now that we're on our 8th one this year. We're getting to the point where we're going to start circling back to update some of our previous projects because we know careers are changing so quickly and rapidly, so they don't just go on the shelf and kind of die after a year. Trying to make sure that they're updated and they're continuing to add new careers that have not existed yet, right? Or changing careers that are continuing to evolve or adapt because of technology, retirements, different uses by business and industry, and so forth. So lots of factors out there that we need to be aware of. But generally around a month or two, lots of research digging into careers that are growing, careers that have a consistent need. We're not going to talk about every career within that industry within the state because that would be massive and nobody would read it. So we tend to try to focus on the consistent needs or that are growing or that we've heard from business and industry that have the potential for growth in the future because of different things that we're not maybe aware of within the Department of Education. We leverage a lot of labor market info, ONET, Career One Stop. We have a partnership with EMSI, MZ, as a lot of people call it. It's a really, really great tool, a paid subscription, but it's very, we found it to be very, very accurate and very, very good. By the way, I'll give a quick shout out to Burlington English as well. We use a lot of their services for a number of our adult education components. They do an amazing job as well. But in terms of the research, EMSI does a really, really good job if anybody's familiar with them. The next couple of months are really working on, fine-tuning those materials, building them out. We do a lot of work kind of ahead of time, even in that months 1 and 2 of trying to find industry partners, which is a critical component. Because if you're a school or a state agency like we are, going out and asking for feedback on these types of roles, you don't have as much credibility unless you have business and industry association representation to essentially vouch for you, right? Add a little bit of credibility. Otherwise, a lot of employers are just like, nope, another government thing, or nope, another education thing. Thanks, but no thanks. So it's very, very important to have somebody else to kind of tie their name to. We find this in a lot of our efforts, sector partnerships as well. As an employer, I'm more willing to participate if I know other employers are involved and you're not just kind of making this up as you go at your computer, in your cubicle, at your state, building or at your college campus. Making sure that we are carefully vetting some of this stuff through employers and business and industry before we even bring them ideas and thoughts and concepts. So the middle of the project is a lot of time really doing focus groups and surveys. We try to do them in person and traveling around the state as much as possible. In the current environment, we've been doing virtual focus groups and still getting quite a bit of success, trying to have engagement during those sessions. But very, very important that we do 4 or 5 of these employer roundtables to get direct feedback. So presenting ideas, making it very clear that we need their help and you're going to take their guidance. You're not just kind of, paying them lip service, but that is going to be used is very, very important. And then last, but at the very bottom here, about the last couple of months, lots of drafts, going back, making changes based on our feedback. This is, again, is where those partners, those employer partners and associations can really help to say, oh, this makes sense, or this jargon is wrong, or, you've missed kind of some of the comments that were made at the focus groups, but a lot of time to make sure we get it right. You don't have to follow that exact timeline, but we found that to be a pretty good sweet spot to get a really, really good product. Now, here are some screenshots from our health science project that we did. And then some of our partners at the bottom of the screen there. Again, all of these are available on the website. They're also all on that Future Ready Iowa site, as well as a number of other locations. These are paper, so there are limitations, unfortunately, but as an electronic PDF, you'll see some other limited interactivity. So a lot of, you'll see tons and tons of links. Each of the careers you can click on and learn more about them within our Future Ready Iowa site, where it actually narrows it down with some of that MZ tool, like I mentioned, Career Coach, where it narrows it down by county and they can see open locations or open opportunities, local education opportunities, wages, and so forth that are, start customizing a little bit based on location. But you'll see lots of pictures, very visually engaging, lots of trying to specifically address stereotypes or misconceptions that might exist that we found in the focus groups or we've just heard from our students or our job seekers. So in healthcare, something that we wanted to pull out early in the document is you don't have to work at a hospital. Right? So trying to call out that there's a lot of different environments in which you can practice these types of careers. You can work in an office, you can work in a community health center, you can work in a laboratory. If you don't like people, that's fine. You don't have to work at a hospital with a bunch of people. You can do a lot of the data analytics, all the other stuff in an office setting or in the back room or wherever. You're not around sick people all day, but trying to help people understand that, you've been to a hospital, you maybe didn't like it, but you do like healthcare or health science. How do I engage with that student and help them understand they can still practice that in different environments? You'll see us talk a lot about technology, how that's changing careers, what are some of the benefits of the industry that you're maybe not aware of, lots of just testimonials and quotes and real Iowans doing these types of careers to try to form that picture of what it means to work within that industry in our state. And again, trying to break those misconceptions of what it means to work within that industry. So along the bottom of the page here, you'll see some examples of community and behavioral health. So we'll group occupations by family, generally 6 occupation families, like work, to try to kind of build out a profile of different types or different areas. But you will see that it's not all those traditional careers. It's actually quite a bit that they're not aware of. But what type of person would really enjoy, working in that community and behavioral health group? We might call them something like the supporters. It's kind of the gamification of it. You'll also see great lengths of talking about what type of person likes that career, what interest type based on the Howlett interest codes, but also not just what that person does in that career, but what impact, the why. A lot of job seekers, particularly our younger audiences, want to understand, what am I doing as a social worker or a community health worker? You can tell me I'm going to be filling out forms, or I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that, but why? What impact am I having? How am I changing things? How am I making a difference? How am I going to be doing, what's the purpose, to help me understand if that's an actual career I want to do for the rest of my life. But you'll see the bubble charts at the middle here, entry level, mid-level, senior level. You will specifically not see any direct arrows, direct linkages between careers, because we found that there is so much flexibility and moving around, even between these families of occupations, that we didn't think it'd be doing justice if we tried to point it out and try to really pigeonhole people into a very specific route. Lots of employers, I'm sure a lot of your states are the same way, are offering leadership and management roles. They're working people up more quickly. They're taking a diverse way of getting there and trying to show those different ways of working my way through this pathway. So here's an example of transportation, distribution, and logistics. Another area that's really booming here in the Midwest, is being kind of a hub in the middle of the country. But you will see, again, some of those traditional types of transportation roles, long haul, short haul, delivery driver, and so forth. But you will also see a lot in the logistics, the warehousing, the quality control, security management type of stuff, sales, business, and so forth. Obviously logistics, but trying to, again, have a shout out of saying, you think you know this industry, but really you don't, because there are all these other careers that are available that you just, when you hear transportation, you're not thinking about. And by the way, they're available in your backyard. So you don't have to leave our state. You don't have to go somewhere else to find this really fulfilling, exciting, innovative career. Here are a bunch of examples, and click here to learn more. And here are a lot of employers within the state who are providing them. So again, lots and lots of testimonials, pictures. You'll see a registered apprenticeship stamp in there if there's an apprenticeship career or a link between that career, because we know a lot of, particularly our older population, our adults, maybe they can't put their life on hold to go back to school, right? So what is an earn and learn model where I'm continuing to provide for my family while I'm learning that career? And again, I'm sure many of your states are seeing this. We're seeing a big expansion with apprenticeship, particularly with registered apprenticeship, but also the new industry recognized apprenticeship programs that are beginning to roll out. Again, lots of industry representation. We just wrapped up a project, actually an update project for IT back in July that you'll see out on the page. And we're right in the middle of a project for business and financial services. I actually had one of those virtual employer roundtables here at 3 o'clock today to present some findings and really have a back and forth with those employers about it. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a network of dedicated and trained workforce or work-based learning professionals here in the state. Again, something that's maybe unique to Iowa, but probably not. It's called maybe something different. But the Department of Education supports this network. As you can see, it's chunked by our 15 community college regions within the state. But these are localized and, like I said, dedicated and trained work-based learning professionals who act as that connector, that intermediary between employers and educators. Now, their sweet spot is really the K-12 world, but a number of them work with the community college world as well. And again, there is no reason that you can't take this model and pull it down for an adult population. So a lot of these groups will partner with our Iowa Workforce Development Centers or our AJCs to work in that capacity, or the community college, somebody else at the community college works in that capacity to be that connector between the adult population and the employers who are looking for job shadows, internships, apprenticeships, and so forth. So I would check them out at iowain.org. Lots of success stories, a bunch of stuff going on. They are doing a lot of virtual events to try and engage with employers and students and kind of keep things alive. So I think they did one today, actually, to try to pull together students and correlate it to education and so forth of what is being taught in the real world sort of thing. But I would check them out on social media as well. And the slides will be available, of course, recording as well. I'm happy to have these conversations with anybody offline as well, if anybody wanted to talk a little bit further. Here's kind of a pretty broad overview of what those intermediaries do. They convene, they connect, they measure, sustain. Again, maybe in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through entirely what they do, but this has been a very, very effective approach of having that local person who knows the landscape and can be the connector. So an employer or an educator doesn't have to go to the phone book or, cold call and try to figure it out. There is a centralized person that knows the landscape and can make that connection. Here's kind of the continuum of different work-based learning opportunities that we might find ourselves. They tend to focus a lot on the exploration chunk in the middle, but again, maybe helping set up or point in the right direction, at least for some of the higher level stuff, apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, internship, stuff like that. Something that we heard a lot during those career pathways projects is what next? You did this really cool industry deep dive. Students are asking me about this, or adults saw this, and or parents saw this, and they said, my student or I want to be a phlebotomist, or I want to be a health analytics professional, but what do I do next? So we've begun developing a series of industry-specific work-based learning toolkits to offer that guidance, so employers feel empowered to work with their local education system and other support partners to set up that next step. So the student learned about it. How do I get them on site for that job shadow or that site visit or that classroom speaking opportunity, and speaking to that employer directly? So we found that a lot of employers would come to us and say, I want to do this. We'd show them a generalized guidance and they'd say, no, I'm a manufacturer, right? I don't care about all that stuff. That doesn't apply to me. Give me something specific to manufacturing, or healthcare. So we said, okay, we'll do a little bit of a deep dive. We'll use what we've learned from our other projects, but also pull employers back together to talk a little bit, not as long as a project in terms of length, but really trying to understand what federal and state rules and laws and regulations are impacting that audience. So youth, but also adults. So 16 to kind of 65 is but what do they need to be aware of as an employer in Iowa, right, when they want to do manufacturing or healthcare or whatever? Also tagging in that intermediary network as those dedicated and local professionals to provide examples, but a lot of time spent narrowing down examples, providing lessons learned and checklists, and here's some baseline guidance as it comes to the rules and regulations. These are not exhaustive legal guides. This is really meant to start the conversation. Almost half of these toolkits are really just examples of where it's working well. So again, that employer educator feels empowered to take those steps to do it at their local level. And then going through the process of reviewing and so forth, of course. So again, snapshots of these really robust and in-depth training or toolkits for healthcare is the example on the screen here, but what is work-based learning, who's involved, sort of thing. But then, like I said, almost half of the document is, here's an example of a really good site tour that happened. Who was involved? Was credit earned? Did they get paid? What are the recommendations the employer gives? And then what are some checklists? If you're thinking about doing a site tour, here are some considerations that go down the list before I even start, really putting into place and really turning my wheels and trying to accomplish this. Bunch of checklists, other things you need to know kind of in the appendix. Healthcare, a big focus on safety and confidentiality and privacy. Whereas for manufacturing, maybe much more so the hazardous occupation sort of offense. So what tools and equipment can people use at different ages and populations? You will always see an adult example in here, by the way, an older population, also a virtual example or a project-based learning example. But again, just a very robust way of presenting kind of a conversation starter, or the meat and potatoes about doing a manufacturing work-based learning event or opportunity within the state of Iowa. And some things to consider: social media, right? How do I protect my intellectual property, stuff like that. So people aren't taking pictures when they're here and all that sort of stuff. Again, checklists and ideas and advice, lessons learned, so that employer doesn't make those same mistakes. Another really, really cool and innovative tool I wanted to present as something that you could do within your own states or your own regions or whatever it happens to be, that's tied to the Future Ready Iowa initiative, is a project board that we collectively call the Iowa Clearinghouse for Work-Based Learning. So if you go to clearinghouse.futurereadyoiowa.gov, you'll see a number of projects that employers have posted where students can apply for and take down, or a teacher can apply for and take down for their students to accomplish within class. To engage with that employer and have that real world business experience across different industries, but I'm working with that employer in my environment or in our current situation in a virtual and safe way where I maybe am not able to take my students on site anymore, or I'm not able to do clinicals, or I'm not able to do whatever it happens to be. How do we present some projects or some other opportunities that can be accomplished in a virtual manner to at least get us some of that way, keep engaged, keep that that relationship alive, and to keep those opportunities flowing? You're starting to see some success stories roll out. This rolled out last year, so about a year and a half old at this point, so still very new. But you're also starting to see some other features roll out. There's a business directory that employers can sign up to be on, so that an educator can kind of find them. They can search for them. Here's my zip code. Here's the industry. Kind of show me who's expressed interest. I kind of jokingly say it's becoming like a dating service, like a Match.com, where I in search of sort of thing. I'm trying to find employers in my neighborhood to team up with. You're also starting to see educators post project requests. So I have a group of students who are trying to find internships, or I have a group of students who really want to do a project, maybe as an IET or IELCE, or some just sort of contextual learning with a manufacturer, healthcare provider, ag producer, whatever it happens to be. You're starting to see kind of the push and pull. So it's really pretty interesting on the site. And they're adding an educator directory. So again, the employers can kind of go there and search and kind of match up, hey, how's it going? Whatever, I saw you on the site, the Match.com thing, eHarmony. But very, very cool tool. Again, I wish we had more time to really go through some of these, but I'd strongly recommend checking them out. Next steps and recommendations. I wanted to leave a little bit of time here. I saw the Q&A box blinking at me a little bit, but check out sectorpartnerships.educateiowa.gov to learn more. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I really left out. An interesting resource that you might be want to learn a little bit more about, particularly when it comes to sector partnerships, is we do monthly conference calls with our facilitators of those groups around the state, and we post those notes online, so on the site. So if you're curious just about what sector partnerships are doing in Iowa and talking about and so forth, I will give a quick warning that because of the pandemic, a lot of groups have kind of been on hiatus, or there isn't as much to report on. Or to be honest, Joe Collins it's on the back burner. I haven't uploaded a lot of our call notes in a while just because of other projects that have popped up. But there's about 4 years worth of notes out there in some cases that you can see what manufacturers in Iowa are talking about, or healthcare providers and so forth. I do a lot of my tweeting from my personal account. That's at jcollinsdsm. But the Iowa Department of Education usually picks it up, or I link to them. So they've got a lot of really good stuff as well. And again, I'd recommend checking out that Iowa Intermediary Network. Knowing that a majority on this conversation are adult learners or adult educators, there's no reason you can't glean some of that information, those strategies and lessons learned for an adult population. So again, I know some of this stuff is K-12 or youth focused, but there's no reason we can't learn from them. It's something that we can't, R&D, like I said, rip off and duplicate within our own state. Check out that Next Gen Sector Partnership group if you're curious. The Department of Labor always has a ton of really good information. They've got career pathway toolkits and lots of other great resources I always try to make sure people are aware of. And then just let me know. If there are ever any thoughts, comments, questions, I'm happy to kind of facilitate that conversation, or take a one-on-one, or talk with you as a group if there's something that's specifically spelled out. I always try to be helpful, knowing that I've gotten some years of experience under my belt, but I know as a new person or young person, it can be very confusing getting in this world. So I always try to kind of pay that forward and try to make sure that we're giving advice and trying to help out our other strategic partners across the U.S. to have a larger or broader impact. And again, we haven't figured everything out in Iowa, not to make that, statement by any means. But if you've got other ideas of ways we could maybe perfect or do anything new based on what we've talked about, I always love to hear about those as well. So I'm going to maybe shut up for a little bit here. I'm going to look at the Q&A box. I saw it, like I said, blinking a little bit. How can you attain 70% goal? So a question was, how do you attain that 70% goal, that Future Ready Iowa, based on a Georgetown study, when the number of people needing certification keeps growing every year? That's a good question. I think a fair question. The goalpost is moving sometimes in some cases, right? So really just a concerted effort within the state of Iowa and all hands on deck kind of rally to get our workforce really educated or trained to meet some of those 21st century skills or those needs, right? So as just a state goal of how do we equip our people to fill that gap and to really pursue something they're passionate about, that we know kind of by the numbers is probably going to need something above high school. And I'm sure it's the same way within many of your states. That does not necessarily mean a college degree. That can mean a credential, a diploma, a certification, something above that high school diploma, right? Something that's going to be needed, or that HSED or the GED, depending on whatever your state does. Yeah, I'm happy to share the slides, the actual slide deck with anybody. I'm not sure if it'll be posted on the page or just a recording, but I'm happy to email that to the group if anybody actually wants those. I'm not entirely sure what in terms of the PDF. I did send it ahead of time to COABE, so I would assume they're going to post it somewhere for download.
Yeah, Joe, we will be posting this along with the replay of the webinar on coabe.org.
Okay. So I see a question, if you don't have an intermediary, right? If you don't have that built network that can be your connector with employers and so forth, it can be kind of tricky. Going back to some of like my days in sales, if you have a target company or target employer, I would go out and Google them. I would do a little bit of research, a little intel. You're not necessarily like stalking them or anything like that, but I would go out and Google the company, see if they've been in the news recently, see if you could find a contact that works in their career services, or they might even have like a workforce person or an education liaison that you just weren't aware of. But I would, one of the best things you can do is really just search for that company or go to their site, look for recent events. So when you email or call them, you can refer to that recent event. I saw you just won this award. Congratulations. I'd like to talk about how we can partner with you in a similar regard. Or I see that you mentioned you want to expand into high schools or adult populations. I have that population. Let's have that conversation. So they know that you're not just trying to sell something, right? You've actually taken some time and some effort to figure out how you link up or what common ground you have. It's an old, an old sales strategy. How do I take a me problem and make it a we problem, right? I'm finding that common ground and I am I'm trying to present a way that we can work together towards this goal. But great question. I see some other questions popping up here. Students with disabilities and career training. That's a great question. The career pathways, and I think I glossed over this, but the career pathways document is meant to show the lowest level of education required in the state that we found, kind of that average. So whether that's high school or a certificate or associates, trying to show the lowest level of education that's required. Is there a license that's required, right? Professional licensure, and then averages in terms of wages, experience, and so forth. So trying to help paint a picture of what you might experience at that local level, but not saying exactly how to get there. I've gotten my head smashed a couple of times, particularly, I don't know about your states, but here in Iowa, registered nurse, some of our healthcare providers require a bachelor's degree, but a lot of them require an associate's. So we put associates in the document and I had a bunch of people breathing down my neck because that was incorrect and yada, 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 yada. So that's where I hope groups will take this information. So Margaret, maybe you take that information and then digest it or synthesize it a little bit further for your population. So that group with the disabilities or that group of that different population, how does that group maybe approach some of these occupations or these opportunities? So I have taken that and then, like I said, synthesized it or customized it to that population, if that makes any sense. But yeah, there isn't anything specifically in there for unique or special populations, just because these are statewide averages and meant to be really a statewide perspective. Any other questions? Yeah, these are great questions. I saw, I was going to go back through lots in the comment or the chat box. The National Network of Sectorial Practitioners. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that term. I am not sure. That's a good question. But I see that you mentioned grants. So because we do a lot of we don't go after a lot of grants to help support these. We haven't in the past, like historically, definitely if it's a specific work-based learning initiative regarding apprenticeships or whatever it happens to be. But for a lot of these projects, it's really just my staff time, how I'm funded through a state general fund. So just kind of my time and my capabilities, and then pulling down some funds from other resources to pay for the printing or whatever it happens to be, or my travel. But generally not a very expensive process because we're just using my staff time. I have been able with some of the projects to have some of our industry partners toss some money in, but generally we say it's a free, can you help us with this with your industry background? There's no charge. Some of them had said yes, they appreciate that we're not charging to have their logo on the documents because they're giving that value to promote and help with the outreach and getting employers excited about it. But some of them had said, that's fine. I'm happy to toss in some money towards it, but definitely not a requirement. We've also, like when we do some of our health science projects, we've had a lot of success in reaching out to our Department of Public Health. The Iowa Department of Public Health has been a great resource where they actually came to us and said, we've got all these workforce goals that the CDC is trying to, implement or trying to work with us on. As the Department of Public Health, we're not workforce professionals, right? We can't do this. So we would like to partner with you. And they've been able to transfer over some of that granting or work through some an interstate collaboration to help segue some of that funding over to the print cost, to the research cost, some of the aspects of it. So there might be some funding that's out there, either from the private or public sector, to try to pull down. I would say never be afraid to ask, but at the same time, you might be biting off more than you can chew, particularly from business and industry, if you're saying, I need you to help on this project and support it and fund it, right? So the either or is generally kind of what we try to focus on. In terms of failures, we haven't really had any projects fail. I would tell you that you are going to have people that come back, like I mentioned, once it gets out. We go through our due diligence to try to get as much feedback as possible. The focus groups are open to everybody. Anybody in the state can join for them. They're not just a specific subset. It's not, voted on or anything like that. So we have this very open. But yes, at the end of the day, once it gets published, you are going to have people come out of the woodwork who disagree with what you've said about an occupation or an industry. You're just going to have that, unfortunately. You're always going to have kind of those haters, for kind of lack of a better term. You just have to kind of keep moving forward. As long as you're doing your best work and you did your due diligence to try to get some of that feedback, I'm not sure what to tell those people, other than maybe in future iterations we'll update it and I'll take that down for consideration. But we've absolutely run into that. Sometimes these are people that were involved in the conversation too, and they just either didn't give the feedback or they didn't make it clear, and then all of a sudden they care once it gets posted, right? Now they care, they want to be involved. Unfortunately, we don't have time machines to be able to do that. So I'm looking at some of the Q&As. Yeah, this is tricky. This is something we're struggling with here in Iowa as well, with the CNAs, lots of the clinicals being shut down. We actually have waiting lists where we have students who were completing a portion of their community college education, but they could not get on site. So they've been struggling a little bit. We also had an emergency declaration. So they released this new type of, it's called a temporary nurse aid. I don't know, other states are probably doing that, but it was literally an 8-hour online program that somebody could take to be able to step into the very low basic level CNAs. But now you're starting to see that we have to get those people through an official training program to get licensed and to get their clinicals. Still a problem. I unfortunately don't have kind of a magic bullet for you, other than, reaching out to a wide range of employers, even outside of your region, particularly within rural areas. You may be more open to taking those students, maybe in a limited capacity, but I would say don't limit your employers that you're engaging with. that you maybe historically have been open for business for the clinicals and the partnership. Think outside of your region, think outside of maybe that comfort zone or that network that you've already built. You might be surprised what's out there. Yeah, so Mary Jane, so working in corrections, yeah, that's tricky. How do I correlate some of that experience living in that type of world, and not the world of work, but how do I talk about careers with somebody who has that criminal background and it maybe doesn't see the value of going to school or doesn't see themselves fitting in that world, right? It can be tricky. It can be very difficult. That's where you could potentially have the career interest types, of course, is something that gets leveraged pretty heavily by schools. So, understanding I'm investigative, artistic, whatever that happens to be, and trying to take that approach, trying to correlate what they did when they were selling drugs or whatever, right? What skills did they have to do that? Was that, entrepreneurship? Was that communications? Did they fine tune their sales skills, right? Not trying to say that there was a benefit to selling drugs, right? But trying to hone in and have a realistic conversation of, you were really good at selling things. You were really good at talking with people. What did you appreciate? And having that conversation about what they enjoy doing, so that they're maybe going to be more open to pursuing that occupation because they see what it's actually doing. And like I mentioned, what is the impact that career is having? So what would I do as an accountant, right? I think I know what an accountant does, but here's actually what they do. How am I using technology? How am I correlating some of that personal experience into different roles? Very, very tricky conversation. Again, I wish I had kind of a silver bullet for you, Mary Jane, but I know a lot of people struggle with that of how do I correlate the corporate world with that personal world and that upbringing and so forth. Very, very tricky. I would just say trying to inform them as much as possible and trying to present them with materials and resources as much as possible that they might identify with. Sector partnerships within the ABE world, potentially. We try to have our corrections staff and corrections world involved in the sector partnership conversations, so employers are aware of that population and building that relationship and trying to understand how to talk with that world and so forth. Nothing necessarily that focuses exclusively on that world, but we always try to make sure that the Iowa Department of Corrections is involved. The local jails, so the Polk County Jail or whatever, whoever that happens to be, trying to have that conversation with employers to understand that maybe that untapped population. We know a lot of employers tend to kind of laser focus on youth, but maybe not, completely understanding that group is a long-term pipeline, right? It's going to take X number of years to get through high school, X number of years to get through college, to get to that world, depending on who they're looking at. But who can fill those short-term, immediate opportunities from our adult world, right? So whether that's veterans or people with disabilities or our retired workers or those with a criminal background, right, our returning citizens, it's always a conversation I try to have with the facilitators of our sector partnership groups so they understand. In a way that I try to present it is, as an employer, if when you're out in your community, take a look around. What do people look like? How are they talking? How are they engaging with one another? And then go back to your shop floor or your workforce and look at that workforce and literally just, what do they look like? If your community is very, very diverse and your workplace is not, something is going on with your hiring practices or your culture. Something is going on, because it should more accurately reflect your diverse community, right? Sometimes that can be a light bulb moment that I didn't think about that. I knew this population was here. I knew they were kind of in the background. I just thought they didn't want to work for me. So they may not realize that their hiring practices, those people are being kind of cut out of the conversation. So how do I begin having the conversation with members of that community or with our local support partners, CDOs, social system, whatever, with members of that population to better engage with them and then turn that discrepancy into a strength, right? So lots of ways to do that, but that's just a strategy that we found success in. So I see a poll coming up here. I think we're running really short. Oh, we're over maybe even time. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I don't know if James, if you had any other parting conversations here.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Joe. That was a great presentation. A lot of great information, good participation. We always like to see that. I want to thank you for doing this. I also want to thank Robert again at Burlington English and their partnership. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this webinar free to our members. I want to thank everybody for participating today. And just as a reminder, again, this presentation along with the replay of the webinar will be posted to coabe.org within 24 hours of now. And I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.